There's no podium. I'm going to sit. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And I want to thank Janessa, and in particular Chuck Waddles, who's in the reading room next door to my office where I sit many days during the week. Puff on a cigar and do my writing. The book, actually, that is for sale out there, was written in large part sitting outside the Monitor building. No one bothers me, guys. The old guy with the cigar sitting in front of the building. It's like, oh, boy. But it works. It's a private space, and it serves me well. Well, I thank you for coming, for the invitation, and for the opportunity to talk about an issue that obviously means a great deal to me. The Arab world is shrouded in myth. Arabs are not understood by us. We live with a great divide. The divide got shattered 9/11 for many. First time Americans could kind of put a face on Arabs. They saw 19. And that came to reinforce a lot of prejudices that they already had had, and to find a world they thought they knew. We can't do that anymore. The Arab world is at our doorstep, actually has always been at our doorstep, and we have been at theirs. But like blind people in darkened rooms, we kind of keep bumping into each other without knowing who's there. If you think about it, even before Iraq, since the end of Vietnam, America sent more money, sent more weapons, sent more troops, fought more wars, lost more lives in the Middle East than anywhere else in the world. We have more investment in that region that is critical to our economy, and not just oil, I might add, because that money gets recycled into treasury bills and underwrites the dollar on world markets. And we have allies at risk, allies with whom we've had long-term relationships. And with all that, we just don't know. When we do polling, a month before America went to Iraq, 11% of Americans could find Iraq on a map. In 2009, after we'd lost 4,000 Americans, a poll was done again, and the number had climbed to 37%. We lost 4,000 lives in a country where about a third of our people, a little more than a third of our people, could even find it. When we asked, and a whole range of questions, like, we asked people what they know, and less than a third know the year that Israel declared its independence. 2/3 think Iran is an Arab country, which it's not. Think Pakistan's an Arab country, which it's not. When we ask the question, what's the problem between us and the Arabs? 85% of Americans say they hate our values. And yet when we poll in the Arab world, we find 65% actually like our values. We don't know. We don't know because our educational system simply doesn't prepare us. It doesn't. The books that we use at the secondary school level simply are devoid of content. The one I used, which I used to call it Stone Age Man to Ike, it started with Stone Age Man in southern Europe, southern France, right? That was the image we had. It had to be in Europe, right? Because God in his infinite wisdom could not have created the first man in Africa. I mean, it was like, had to be a white guy, first man. So it starts in Europe, and then we go to the Greeks and the Romans, and then you do the Holy Roman Empire. You go from the Holy Roman Empire to the Dark Ages, and then you go to the Renaissance, and then the emergence of the nation state in America. That was the history of humanity. The Arabs work into that story with a picture. I remember there was a picture of a guy on a camel in front of two pyramids. You might remember the picture. I think it was product placement. You wouldn't have known what a Camel cigarette was. It's like one of those two funny-looking triangles. And it was a section on the Bedouin life, It was also, it got the same play as the lapse of Scandinavia, because they were a thing on Bedouin in the north, and these were Bedouin in the south. And then there was a section on China that was the Great Wall and Marco Polo. Marco Polo was like our invention. We needed to have a white guy find it, right? Because it was lost otherwise. The fact that the Chinese had been like, the trade had been flowing from east to west for centuries was simply not something we could grasp. I mean, the Mongols were not the destroyer of civilization, but they were the greatest conveyors of civilization from east to west, had established trade routes that had literally brought the riches and the discoveries and everything of the east to the west. I mean, what would the Italians be eating if not for the Mongols? I mean, there was no spaghetti. There was no noodle. The concept comes from China. My people, the Lebanese, and the cuisine of the Eastern Mediterranean comes from the Mongols, who brought it from east to west. And we didn't know it. And the Dark Ages, there was no such thing as the Dark Ages. What happened was that trade routes passed from north to south. And when trade goes from north to south, so too does wealth. When wealth goes, so too does learning. So too do the centers of knowledge. And so what happened was, it wasn't Plato and Aristotle didn't get buried. The books didn't sort of disappear for 4 centuries. They actually were translated into Arabic, and knowledge continued. There was a continuous flow of human learning, of human advancement. It happened in philosophy, it happened in science, it happened in technology, it happened in art and architecture, it happened in music. And then as trade routes moved back north, what happened was it all began to flow back up north again, and you call the period the Renaissance, which was really nothing more than this transfer of knowledge from one place where it had been for a while back to another place. There was a continuity. There's an interdependence of learning. That's who we are. Martin Luther King used to say, by the time I get up in the morning and shave and bathe and eat my breakfast and get in my car, I'm the beneficiary of the labors of 43 countries. And that's not just true in that way, but as we sit here in this room, we are the beneficiaries of thousands of years of human civilization that has been interdependent, with one culture feeding on another and vice versa. And yet that's not how we learn it. So it's our story, and then they're the deepest, darkest Africa story, sort of the lost place. It wasn't lost. Columbus didn't discover America. It hadn't been lost. It was there all the time. And civilizations had been developing there. But when you learn it that way, then everything else becomes a cipher. And everything else becomes then something that you need in order to understand. The only way you can understand it is to sort of see it in stereotypes. And where do you get the stereotype? If you don't have direct knowledge, and most Americans don't have direct knowledge of the Arab world, you get them from popular culture. And popular culture is notorious at creating stereotypes, and in particular of Arabs. I did a study back in the 1980s of popular culture, and what I found was that there wasn't a single image of an Arab that was positive on television in the 80s at that time. There are a couple now. If you think about it, if all we knew were stereotypes, then all Italians would be this, and all Jews would be that, and all blacks. Sure, the popular culture stereotypes, they resonate. I had a presentation I made to NBC at the time. It was kind of interesting because the executives there were really interested in trying to help make a difference. ABC and CBS didn't want to talk about it, but NBC did. Bruce Paltrow, you may know the name. He was a great TV producer. One of his last show was St. Elsewhere. People remember that. He's better known today as the father of Gwyneth, but he actually had a life before Gwyneth. He was doing St. Elsewhere at the time, and I wanted to see them about the thing, and I said, "This is ridiculous. There isn't a positive image anywhere to be found." And he said, I should do a doctor in the hospital. St. Elsewhere was a hospital. I said, yeah. It's like there isn't an American hospital that doesn't have too many doctors that are Arab or South Asian. It's called the brain drain from that part of the world. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have one of the writers get in touch with you, and you'll talk and work something out. and we'll do it. So the writer called me from Hollywood. We spent a couple hours on the phone discussing scenarios and characters and stuff. And about a month later, he sends me a script. I swear this is the script. A stretch limo pulls up in front of the hospital. A guy comes out, and in the script it said, he's wearing sheets. And he didn't mean Ku Klux Klan. He meant towel. Now, like, doctors don't. Anyway, he goes into the hospital. The first thing he does is he stops in the gift shop, and he opens a Playboy magazine. There are no Playboy magazines in hospital gift shops. And he opens it up and he looks at it, and his first words are, "I like this. We do not have it in my country." That was the character. So I closed the script. I've actually read the rest of it. The story was all right, but I called the guy. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I needed to make the guy believable." The point, in other words, is that in order to shatter the stereotype, he was using the stereotype, and he wasn't shattering it at all. He was reinforcing it. He couldn't do something good because he didn't know enough to do good. And it's the same in schools. I mean, after 9/11, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs did a study in Chicago schools. They said the kids were asking all the right questions. Teachers couldn't answer them because they didn't know. And the textbooks didn't have the information to provide it for them. And so the kids didn't get the answers. Everybody had questions, but the answers they got were the wrong ones. They got, "They hate us for our values." They got, "You don't know them." This sort of the them word, as if it's some sort of amorphous collective of evil that somehow needs to. So because of this, because of these stereotypes, what happens is that we operate in this world not knowing, tripping over them and ourselves, and we get into blunders. Time after time after time, our foreign policy is based on blunders simply because we don't know, or worse than don't know, we actually think we know. And too many of the folks from television and newspaper, media guys, I mean, they're notorious because what happens with the media culture and the political culture is they take ignorance to a whole new level. They take ignorance and make it into certainty. So you listen to guys on Fox News. I got called one time to do Fox News on Afghanistan. She said, "We need you to come on and talk about Afghanistan." I said, "I don't do Afghanistan." She laughed. She said, "Nobody ever says that. We're a good talker, though. You can do it." I said, "I don't like to talk about something I don't know anything about." She said, okay, you can read the newspaper and just come on." And I said, "No, it's too damn important. People are dying." But it's like she couldn't get it. CNN called me one time to do a show on Iraq with Bill Bennett. So what does he know about Iraq? Gambling, maybe. Drugs, maybe. I was the drug czar for a while. But I'm not talking to him about Iraq. He doesn't know anything. He said, "But you're good talkers and it'll be a good debate." It was entertainment for them. It was ratings for them. But it's lives at stake. And it didn't matter. At the end of the day, it didn't matter as long as the show was like a cool show. And politicians are worse. They prey off fear. I mean, the stereotype is a given. You listen to Republican debates right now, and the big issue is, should they take loyalty oaths or not? Should Muslims have to take loyalty oaths before they serve in government? Should there be Sharia? There will not be Sharia law in my administration. Who the hell wants Sharia law? They passed a resolution in Oklahoma banning Sharia law from Oklahoma. No one was proposing Sharia law in Oklahoma. No one who passed the law knew what Sharia law was. Didn't matter. It was a wedge issue. They used it as an issue to create fear, to mobilize votes, and it worked. And it worked. It is a sad state of affairs, but that's where we are right now. That's where we are in this debate. We're debating things that are not relevant, and we don't know what's relevant. And so one of the things we try to do is we try to poll. We poll because my mom used to tell me all the time, you need to listen. If you listen to people, then you'll know what they're saying. And she always used to argue with me. I had an Aunt Marie who I'd love to argue with because she was a great debater. And my cousin is here. She was just a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she engaged me and took me seriously. I'm 14 years old, we'd be debating something, but my mother'd come home, she'd want to whack me one because she'd say, you didn't hear a word she said. The minute she started to talk, you were sitting at the edge of your seat waiting to respond. And she said, she's not going to hear you if you don't listen to her first. If you don't know what she's saying, you don't know what to say. You don't know what her argument is. And unfortunately, too much of even our diplomacy is based on simply not knowing the people we're talking to. So we're answering questions they're not asking. We're talking to them as if we know them, but don't. And so therefore talking about things they don't even care about. And not dealing with the issues that they care about most. I had meetings with the public diplomacy czars before they go off to do their trips. Charlotte Beers to Karen Hughes and Jim Glassman and all the rest of them. And they'd ask me, what's the thing I should do first? I say, listen. Just go and listen. When politicians do a listening tour, when they say, I'm going on a listening tour, they're actually lying to you. They don't listen. Politicians don't know how to listen because what the listening tours become like the thing to say, to think, it's like the boyfriend who's trying to like seduce the girlfriend. Like he'll say whatever he needs to say. So I'm here to listen to you. The little voice inside saying, I actually know everything already, but I'm just, because I know you want me to think I'm listening to you, I'm going to listen. And so nothing really happens in that process. But we actually try to listen. We poll, and we take all the answers we get. We respect every single one. And what we do is we record them by country, by gender, by age, and we then analyze the data. It's as if you open a window and you let 4,000 voices in. And when the 4,000 voices come in, what happens is that you end up hearing what they say. From Morocco to Saudi Arabia to Egypt. And what they're telling you is some interesting things. They're telling you, number one, the myths aren't real. I have a minute left, and I'll just tell you about a couple. You know, one of the myths we have, when we poll Americans and we say, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Arabs? They say violence and terrorism and oil and wealth. 85% give those answers. When we ask them what's the best thing you can think about when you think of Arabs, 55% say nothing. When we poll Arabs, we say, what do you want? What do you want in your life? What are the most important political concerns you have? The myth we have is that Arabs are sitting around all day hating America and go to bed at night hating Israel and wake up in the morning hating a little bit more and go to the mosque where they hear an imam teach them a little more hate, or sit home and watch Al Jazeera, which makes them hate even more. That's not what you learn. That's not what you learn when you poll. What you learn is that their number one political concern is a job. And their number two is education. And their number three is healthcare. Sound familiar? And then you work down the line. It's issues close to home that matter most. It's their children. And it's their families and their grown-ups, their parents. They want to take care of them. They want to make sure that life works for them. And when they watch television, guess what they watch? Movies and soap operas and reality shows. During the middle of the Tunisian uprising, I was in the home of a Saudi friend we were watching the news and going back and forth, and all of a sudden his son walked in and he said, "It's on!" And the TV got turned immediately to Arabs Got Talent, which is like Americans Got Talent, and that's what they were watching for the next hour, and the TV went off, and we played cards and whatever. And we find that reality shows, game shows, and fun shows like that, people watch television to get entertained. They don't watch it to get angry. I mean, some people do, but most people don't. What you learn when you listen is who people really are. And if you know who they really are, I remember the first time I went to the Middle East in 1970 when I went to a Palestinian refugee camp to do the first part of my doctoral dissertation work. And I heard everybody's stories and I logged them all down. I still have my notebooks of everyone's stories from 1948 when they left. And the day I left, the grandmother of the kid who was taking me around the camp, she came up to me, a little tiny thing. She grabbed my arm and she looked at me as hard and as stern as anybody had ever looked at me in my life. And she said, "You've heard everything we told you. You've heard everything we've told you. Now what are you going to do with it?" And I learned a lesson then, that if you listen, you end up with a responsibility to do something. And it sometimes is compelling, it sometimes is changing life direction, but it's important. And I think our country needs a dose of listening right now. So thank you for being here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.